So welcome. We're just working on getting a slide up here, our title slide. You're here today in the health and safety breakout for the 2022 Camp Symposium. We're going to be talking about camps and interactivity, staying healthy and vibrant in these kind of crazy times that we have these days. So so here we are. And my name is Pita MamBear, and I am a volunteer for camp support, and I'm also a co-lead for Fafa Camp. Behind the scenes today, we also have Epiphany, who is our chat moderator, and K-Bot, who is our tech moderator. So there's three of us working here to bring you an awesome experience. And again, we're so glad that you're here. So before we get started, I just wanted to review some of the guidelines that we have for today's session. So K-Bot, if you could move to the next slide. There we go. Just to let you know, we'd like, you're going to be muted if you're not a panelist. And if you have a comment or a question, please type it in the chat. We have a very kind of dynamic chat where a lot of the conversation and connecting happens. Your questions are going to be collected, and we have a Q&A time period at the end of our session here. And we're going to be posing your questions to the panelists. So just put those questions in the chat. Be respectful in your participation. Be present. We're all here to learn together, and it's be very gracious with your attention. Speak from your own experience. And once again, our chat moderator will be bringing questions in during the Q&A period of the breakout. So we can go ahead and get started. So if we just want to go back to spotlighting our panelists, I'd like to introduce our panelists today. First, we have Bridget, or Tetris, as she is known on the playa, and she is the camp lead of the BRC Piano Bar and co-mayor of the Ebb and Glow Village. She's been an RN for 30 years, and for the last 1.5 years, the COVID lead at a high school in California. Welcome to Bridget, and thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Our next panelist is Anton. Anton was fortunate to be brought to the burn for the first time in 2016 by some experienced folks who taught him how to run camps and build art. Since then, he's led theme camps, most recently the Friend Manufacturing Company, look for the Friends sign, and built an art car, Storytime, as well as smaller playa art. In leading these projects, he's thought a lot about how to make camp safe and effective, had a few run-ins with danger, and learned a lot about building strong communities and how to get together in the desert to play, build, and be safe. Welcome, and thank you for being here. Our next panelist is Jedidiah. Jedidiah was raised on a cattle ranch in New Mexico and is a wizard chef and event producer. He has experience throughout the US, Baja, Mexico, the North Island of New Zealand, and Costa Rica. He is a founder and mayor, Maynot, of Rancho Sparkle Pony for 10 years, and his favorite food is frozen peaches. So these are our panelists. Hello, everybody.
Hello, everyone.
Yay.
Hello, everyone.
And
Hey.
panelists, if you could just be muted until it's time for you to speak, that would be great. Awesome. And again, welcome to all of our guests. You're here for the health and safety breakout session for Camp Symposium 2022. So we're going to go ahead and get started. We're going to be talking first about just some general camp safety planning, just some overall considerations that you and your camp may want to be thinking about as you get ready for your playa adventure. Bridget put together a slide deck for us. So if we could go ahead and start looking at that slide deck, and I'm going to pass it to Bridget.
Thank you, Pita. Thank you so much. Hey, everybody. since 10 o'clock this morning, I've just been in heaven. Like, I'm just so glad to be back. I'm so ready to get to Playa. One of the things that was said this morning that I didn't think about, I don't think I remember how to put up our shade. We're gonna have to figure that out. But anyway, am I able to, there's the slide deck. Okay. So what I would like to talk to you about is sort of the medical safety. How can we, in our camps and in our villages and on the playa, be in a safe medical environment? So again, like Pita said, I'm a registered nurse. I have been working as a COVID lead for the last 1.5 years, and we're just going to touch on that at the end. There's other things other than COVID that also affect our camps and our villages in a medical aspect. So if we go to the next slide, please. So one of the things that I find very helpful is that I keep medical information on all of my campers. This is really, really helpful because somebody in a medical emergency may not be able to tell you their history. And out on Playa, you know, we have our EMTs, and we do have ways of transporting people to hospitals. But it really is very helpful to have, for the EMTs to have a knowledge base of this person's history. So some of the things you definitely want to include are, you know, existing medical conditions. So if you find somebody who's unconscious and you don't know they're a diabetic, you know, that you could be treating them for the wrong thing. A medication list, and how often are they taking this? You know, sometimes days go by on Playa and you don't really remember what day it is, and maybe you've forgotten to take that blood pressure medication, and now you are potentially having a stroke. Allergies is another big thing. You know, people are trying things. They're receiving different things, different foods, different drinks, and maybe they have an allergy. So those are the things. Now, an emergency contact, maybe not so important for us, but it definitely will be once we get, once this person who needs medical attention gets to the EMT or gets transferred to a hospital. How do we contact their next of kin? We're going to talk about COVID vaccination status. I put that on there. It's important to know, are they vaccinated? Have they had their first or second booster? And then their insurance information. Again, that's not important for us, but it is important if they get to a hospital. What I would recommend is, so I made this form and the link to it will be in the chat. And what I would ask is I'm asking my people to make a copy, to copy onto the back of this form their COVID vaccine card and their insurance information. And then this way, even if the person can't respond, you can get them the medical help that they're going to need, because everything is on this form. All right, next, please. One of the things that I would encourage all camps and villages to do is include a really well-stocked emergency first aid kit in your budget. We think about all these other things, but sometimes we forget how important it is to have something on site. There are EMTs driving around, there's rangers around, but you are going to be that person's first line of help. So get yourself a really good medical kit. I'd also appoint someone to be your medical lead. Even if that person doesn't have medical background, at least they're going to know where your forms are, where is your medical emergency kit, that type of stuff. I would, in one of my meetings leading up to leaving for Playa, I always do a basic emergency first aid, just so anybody can help. And then when we get to camp, I review, I make a little sign that says our emergency kit is here. And then I review, again, just basic stuff. You don't, somebody falls off a ladder, you don't want to be moving them. Just basic stuff so that we can provide the best care for somebody who's injured or ill. All right, next. Next, please. Thank you. What kind of medical emergencies would you have on Playa? Well, one of the first things you want to do, if you find somebody who's unconscious, somebody who's fallen, you want to ask people around you if anybody saw what happened. That's one of the very first things. Because you want to know, is this person been down a long time? Were they vomiting before? Somebody who might have a little bit of history. Some of the main things that we see on Playa are dehydration, really really frequent. So what we do in our camp, we have a code word, and it's I love you. And if you're working with somebody and you're noticing they're not drinking, you're going to say, hey, George, I love you. And that reminds them to take a drink. So you're not this annoying person. Did you drink? Did you drink? Did you drink? But it's a positive way to make sure that everybody stays hydrated. You want to know about people's pre-existing condition. Again, that goes well with that. That really is helpful with that medical form. Is somebody diabetic? Does somebody have asthma? Cardiac and neurological problems, really, really significant when somebody, especially when somebody gets dehydrated. We're also going to have to deal with injuries. We're going to have to deal with people who cut themselves, people who fall and break something. My first year, right when I was across from my very first year, we had somebody who was on a one wheel and fell off and fractured his arm and his jaw. And we had to administer first aid to him. We got him help, and he was evacuated eventually. But these things happen all over the place. Head injuries is a big thing. The other one that I just realized that I hadn't put on here was burns. We're dealing with a lot of fire, right? So we're going to have burns, and we really have to think about that. If you do get presented with someone who has a medical emergency, send somebody, just like we would call 911, send somebody to find a ranger, and then tell them to come back. Just like you would if you say to somebody in a medical emergency, go call 911 and come back. You want to say the same thing to that person, because you don't want 10 people going out. You say, go find a ranger and come back, and make sure they bring that ranger back with them. Okay, next. So one of the other things that was on that other page is intoxication. One of them is alcohol and opioids. It is something we see a lot on Playa. Alcohol, there are definitely drinks out there now that can help with hangovers and everything else. The other thing is that sometimes people just need IV fluids, and then at that point you would get them to one of the help stations and get them hydrated, and get them the help they need when it comes to alcohol. One of the biggest problems obviously is opioids, and one of the things that your camp can do in prevention and in potentially avoiding a fatality, one of the things your camp can do is get fentanyl strips. We all know that many drugs out there are laced with fentanyl, and people who do use these type of drugs are aware that these strips are available. You can test something before you take it, and know that it's not laced with fentanyl. So there is a link that I have. We're going to put it in the chat. It is really a good thing. This is obviously California based, but where you can get the information through this link. And then you can also look in your own state what the guidelines are and requirements. The next slide is what do you do in the event that you find somebody who is unconscious? What is your immediate reaction? Obviously, you're going to send somebody to go get a ranger. You're going to try and pull that person's first aid form. But the other thing that your camp can have and should have on in your emergency kit is you should have something called Narcan. Narcan is used to immediately reverse opioid overdose. It is completely benign. There is nothing wrong with taking it if you have not taken opioids and you're not overdosing on it. What it does do is it affects the brain and shuts off what the opioids is doing. So it's a very quick, rapid, jarring response. So you'll see somebody who's unresponsive, you give them the nasal spray, and all of a sudden they wake up. And what you're going to want to do with that person, and these forms are really good, you want to turn that person on their side. They're going to look to you like they're completely normal. So you're just going to roll them over on their side, and you're going to let them stay there for a little bit. And after 10 minutes, you are going to repeat this. And the reason why you repeat it a second time is in case that their opioid load was so high that they're going to kick back in again. So just keep them under clear watch, and I would get this person medical attention. There's a link in this slide that it relates to Narcan and how you use it. And again, this is something that anybody can do. I hate to say this, but my kids have them in their backpack. They're young teen. My son is 19 and does go to to bars where supposedly there's no alcohol, but there's a lot of opioids going around. So it's easily used, it's easily administered, and it will save somebody's life. So there is a link under there about how to use it. And the next slide, and my last slide, is this is how you can get it. So in California, Narcan is free in any pharmacy. If you use this link and you can get to that request form, in there, you can actually print out a form and you can bring it to the pharmacy and they will give it to you. There are rules and regulations that are different in every state. If you look at that sort of blackish dark gray, that you can actually click on your state and figure out what your state requirements are, and how you would obtain it in your state. So I hope that this information was helpful. If you have any questions, oh, sorry, I think I have one more. I have COVID. Sorry, I'm didn't even want to go there. So if you were here this morning from 10 o'clock, you heard Charlie talk about the org and how they're working with COVID. It is on everyone's mind. I'm waiting for the org to really solidify their guidelines. And I would recommend that everybody follow what their guidelines are going to be. One of the things you can do to prepare yourself is obviously you can go to the CDC and get information. I also put in here a link for what Nevada's guidelines are going to be, because Nevada's guidelines are actually very different than where I live in California, but you can get some really good information from there. And then obviously you will get updated information from the org, and the link is there too as well for the COVID page. One of the things I would do is I would bring some N95 masks, which everybody has anyway, not a big deal. Bring some antigen tests and just have them available. Rapid tests, you can buy them, you can order them from the government free now. And then obviously have people's vaccination updates on their medical form. And then we'll see, you know, like I think one of the ongoing conversations is what are we going to do with people who test positive? So this is ongoing conversations the org is having, and hopefully those questions can be answered as we get closer to the date. And that is my presentation. If you have questions or thoughts, I'd love to share them with you afterwards. Thanks.
Thank you, Bridget. That was very conclusive. We did put a link to the presentation in the chat, so take a look for that, and a lot of good information. And again, thanks for putting that together. I really appreciate it. Anton, I wanted to direct it to you about, so we've talked about our medical safety, and directing it to you around emotional safety, social safety, and what you're doing in your camp, or what you have done in your camp to address these different issues.
Yeah, thanks very much. And yeah, thanks everyone for coming and spending time with us on a Saturday to talk about something like safety, which is of course important, but also third. And yeah, like one of the things we've tried to do in our camp is yeah, really think about how to create like a safe container, both yeah, physically, but also kind of psychologically and emotionally. And that comes from a place of, you know, wanting camp to be a safe harbor for the kind of, and a home when you're like doing the kinds of like exploration and adventures that people like to have at Burning Man, right? And you might go out and challenge yourself in some way, whether it's climbing something and falling off, or whether it's like having an interpersonal experience that really shapes you. And you want somewhere where you can go, where you're gonna feel safe, and where you're gonna be able to integrate and process that experience. And kind of across all of those things, you know, thinking about COVID, particularly when we thought we were going to go in 2020, and then when we did go to the Renegade Burn in 2021 with all its kind of like new challenges, one of the questions we kind of faced was like, how do you have a conversation? And where we came to was, it's not, you know, like with COVID safety is a kind of a good example for us, not so much about rules straight away, right? Because the situation is going to change. It's going to be dynamic. But rather it's about how you build an environment where people can have, you know, really honest, authentic kind of conversations with one another about what their needs are and what their priorities are, and what something like their health status is, or like maybe if they, you know, need to share, you know, something serious that's happened to them. And how do you build that with a camp that's really kind of different and diverse? In our case, you know, we're based out of the Bay Area, but we have people from all over the United States and around the world. And, you know, some people are enthusiastic members of, you know, Bay Area kink communities, and some people are, grew up in the Midwest and weren't exposed to consent in the same way that we're exposed to here. And so we've worked to basically build a set of shared values that we can all start with. And that's really helped a big conversation about like what people prioritize and what they like about camp. And then when we went, where we're going from there is we have sort of some trainings and workshops to get people on the same page. So in the COVID example, we had some conversations where people could start to learn to communicate about what their health needs are. And the consent example, we're actually going to have this year, and we've done in past years, like consent workshops. So at least people have shared language with which to communicate. And when you get those things right, we're basically practicing this effort of like being on the same page and having language to communicate, so that if, say, I'm on playa and I feel like I have COVID symptoms, well, we've already talked about COVID, maybe only over Zoom, but like I actually feel more empowered to be able to bring it up. And I also know that there's these people in camp who are available to talk about those things. And so I think all of those things really help. Basically, how do we level up everyone to at least like some platform of shared understanding and communication, so that as events arise, maybe safety issues come up, people can, communicate about them and feel comfortable communicating about them and know who they can go to talk to about certain things. Or even if it's someone that's not, say, the camp appointee, like health person, they're like, well, I feel safe with Anton because we talked about this. They can bring something to me and I can bring it to that person. So that's more the meta. And I if people are curious in the Q&A, you can ask. We have some ways we did that with discussion documents, Zoom calls, things in person. But I also wanted to talk about some of the more tactical things we did, if that's sort of the strategy. And so one is we have, and honestly, all of these tactical things, I should say, were just blatantly stolen from other camps. I, talked to a lot of camp leads, and whenever someone has a good idea, I'm just like, brilliant, like, let's do that. So this first one's one of those. We have a camp dominatrix that we borrowed as an idea from our friend's camp, Johan, where every day there is someone who is the point person for the camp. They're the person who's expected to be sober. They're not there to do all the work of the camp for that day, but they are there to be available for questions and to be available to bring issues to. And so that's anything from someone's hurt themselves, hey, I just noticed this person is kind of out of it, to like the Rangers are here or the BLM is here and someone needs to take point on talking to them. So we have a schedule for that for the week. The dominatrix has a whip. That's how you can identify them. And it's also kind of an atomic transfer of power, when they hand that whip over to the next person for the next day. So that's something we really like. Second thing we have is a couple of different camp safe words, which have been really effective. And so one is a safe word. We use the word jello, which I literally took that word from the other camp who was doing this. And it's kind of like something weird is going on. So that could be, there's a person who, like some visitor to camp and they're being really creepy towards one or more people. Or again, they seem kind of out of it or something. Or maybe we think this person could be an undercover cop, just anything that's like making the person engaging with it feel uncomfortable. You could also use that for non-interpersonal situations. And you can just work it. The nice thing about it is you can work it into a conversation. You can be like, hey, Anton, like, are we having jello later? And I'll like know something's going on and I can maybe figure out, get involved in the situation, figure out, or go find someone else, etc. The second thing we have is a kind of psychedelic safe word, because we know people engage in different things and sort of different adulterants when they're out on playa. And sometimes it's good, and they also play games. That's maybe part of that experience. And so sometimes it's good to have like a reality check. And so our safe word from Alex Shulgin's like original psychedelic explorations is called hands in the air. And if you want, you can like put your hands in the air as you say it, so people know what's going on. And that means like what I'm about to ask or say is like about like the state of consensus reality, or it's a reality-based question. So it could be something like, hands in the air, do you guys smell smoke, or is that thing on fire? And it lets you have a way of sort of requesting that people don't fuck with you, requesting that people take what you're about to say seriously. And actually what I've learned is that people from our camp have started using that in just totally, non-party and non-Burning Man context, which is really interesting, right? Just like, hey, hands in the air, let's pay attention to that thing. So that's cool. We're fortunate. We also have like a few people with different levels of training in our camp, from like EMTs to people with Zendo training and so on. And so that's really great. We make sure those people are identified, not as the person whose job it is to do something, but as the person who you could go to if they're around to ask questions. And we're also trying to push that training, or at least opportunities to get it out to other people in our camp, because kind of the more of that you have, the better. And then I think the last thing I'll add is we've started and kind of got a bit more specific at this year, having like a safety team. So again, that's a group of people who are known to the camp, who both think about, safety issues and how to develop them, and particularly around, more this like emotional, mental safety and things like consent and consent education. And so they're able to be talked to about issues, they're able to figure stuff out. But we've also got this process called like a safety incident team that we borrowed from a community here in the Bay Area. And that's for if something safety related happened. Again, could be physical, could be like someone fell off something, or it could be like a consent violation, for instance. But the basic idea of that is a very lightweight and idea, like not supposed to be confrontational thing, but like just, hey, if you have an issue, you can bring it to these people, and if it's serious, a group of 3 people will go and basically look into it in a way that can be confidential, and they'll come back with a recommendation for sort of what should happen to maybe resolve that situation, as well as recommendations for just as a camp how we can do things better. And again, that's not necessarily supposed to be confrontational or anything, although some of those recommendations, say in the consent violation example, could be require, hey, here's how we're going to deal with this, and maybe someone needs to camp somewhere else or something like that. But also really just to provide people, again, a safe container so that the camp can learn and so that situations can be resolved, ideally before they get bigger or blow up, in a way that's understandable to everyone. So those are our tactical things. I think, maybe the final thing I'll just add is, I think for us and maybe others, building a Burning Man camp is, this really amazing adventure and community, and particularly figuring out how people who do all these intense and wonderful things together can also like care for and support each other. And kind of the way I like to think about it is building up from, making sure people feel personally okay and can look after themselves, up to this level of interdependence where we also build this level of trust between one another, so that people feel, can feel safe to both like bring up problems, but also like go out and challenge themselves, and know that there will be this like supportive environment for them at the end. Sort of how you do that is really important, I think. And just, getting your camp talking about it and providing opportunities for people to practice doing that is really important. So thanks very much, and happy to take questions at the end or in the chat.
Thank you, Anton. Everyone remember, participants, if you have any questions, put them in the chat, because we do have some time set aside for Q&A at the end. But thanks very much, Anton, for kind of rounding out that bit of safety information, thinking about how we can stay emotionally safe as well as physically safe. Just all important so that we can have a great time out there on the playa. We're going to move on to our next topic, which is kitchen safety, kitchen and interactivity safety. But we're going to focus first on kitchen food safety, and this is where I'm going to turn to Jedidiah here, who has lots of experience in this area. And I wanted to ask Jedidiah, what are your top 10 tips for maintaining a well-organized, clean kitchen area, washing area? So go for it.
Okay, well, first off, I want to say no one's ever died from bad sound or bad lighting, but they've certainly died from bad food and poor rigging. So keep that in mind. We have developed in a rather large camp and sometimes village at Rancho Sparkle Pony. Started with about 27 people. Now we're upwards of 150. With a few smaller kind of projects that happen within the camp. But through the whole time, I've set up sort of a hostel style kitchen where everyone has access. So I'll build the kitchen out. It's got your cookware, it's got your oils and your salts and your sugars and those sorts of things. And then you bring your food and cook it and share your food, which works great. And I definitely want to touch on food permits at the end of this. But here's my top 10. Lay a ground cloth. We use a carport, 20 by 10 carport. We're up to 2 of those now with a bigger kitchen, but cover that whole space, because you roll that up, you peel it up, you got fresh playa underneath, and the kitchen's where you're going to have bacon grease and all sorts of food bits all over the place, lots of moop. It only took me a few years of people brushing their teeth in the kitchen sink before I just got completely grossed out and created a vanity. So we have a shower complex, but we also have a beautiful vanity. You get to go and spend time with yourself alone or with a friend and with a mirror, wash your hands, wash your face, brush your teeth, clean your nose out, all those sorts of things. And it works really well to keep the kitchen clean and cleaner. Utilize single-use items. I don't eat every meal every day. And as a camp lead, I'd rather deal with less water on playa. I'd rather deal with less dishwashing on playa. Dishwashing implies that those items have to be sanitized for people to use them again. And for us, somebody's going to eat on a piece of wax paper, a quesadilla. It's not worth all that wash water to wash a plate for them to eat on. I've eaten out of the same paper bowl multiple times myself as well. I do like washing plasticware. You get the compostable plasticware. That's something that can be washed. But I cut my teeth on Rainbow Kitchens and in Vision Fest, where we supplied everybody with their own utensils. Someone should have their own cup, their own bowl, and their own fork if they're not going to use the single use. Number 4, do not supply campmates with drinking water. It's probably the worst thing that I could do would be to tell somebody to come out to the desert and tell them that I'm going to provide their drinking water for the whole week. Very, very, very irresponsible. We do supply water for washing and for washing your body and for things that are not drinking, but I definitely make sure everybody brings their own drinking water. Makes it easier on us to provide water for washing. Use freezers, not refrigerators. Refrigerators just attract people's scraps. They get really gross. We used freezers for a while and let people put stuff in the freezers. And the first year, because we didn't have shore power, we didn't have 24-hour power, there was about a 3.5-inch thick ice at the bottom of the freezer that had popsicles and bacon and eggs and all of this, and we had to break it with a pike. It was a moop disaster. So what I've done is I've taken it, so now we fill our freezers with frozen water bottles and ice, and then distribute to campmates. Frozen water bottles work great. Distribute to campmates frozen water bottles so that they keep their perishable foods in their own cooler. People are responsible for their own perishable food, and yet they can come to our kitchen and use it to make meals. Do not accept gifted ingredients. I'll tell you, though, I had to shut off popsicles a long time ago, especially with this power thing. I mean, your freezer's off for 12 hours for some reason, and it's just slime everywhere. It's the worst thing. The thing becomes a compost bin. Bacon. There was a year when Gate would only accept whiskey and bacon because they've gotten so many donations that's all that was left. But we've even gotten to the point where we have to turn down bacon. It gets thrown away. You really technically can't donate perishable food. That's really against the law. Have multiple ways to cook food on hand. So, have a charcoal grill, have a couple of flat tops, have a couple of burners. We find that having sort of a restaurant style flat top grill or griddle with a bacon fat catch is an excellent way for people to be able to cook. Then again, you're not washing out little saucepans and things like that. You've got these few kind of, it's worth it to invest in like semi-professional cookware. Trash, compost, and the rest of it. We've got a box truck now. Usually we have a vehicle that we've identified as our trash truck. As we grew, trying to stack trash bags on top of a pop-top camper and keep it all cinched down so we could get it to town. I mean, we really had to organize and say like, hey, this has grown to be such a big thing. If every camper has a black trash bag that's equal to the amount that they've created for the week, that means I've got to deal with 155 trash bags at the end of the week. So have a plan to sort of sort and transport that trash, and contact people who's going to take that trash out. The worst thing is the world when other camps dump their trash on you because you're not looking. It's a total nightmare. Signage works really well, right on top of the freezer. No food donations, ice only. It's worth a shot, but it'll save you a lot of time. Here's a real pro tip for you. 50 parts per million to 100 parts per million bleach to water ratio is sanitizing fluid. And if you put that in squirt bottles, like we have our white vinegar for our feet and our hands, we also have squirt bottles with NaCl in it so that we can sanitize any surface at all. And I've just found that the campmates really love that. You can even spray that on your hands if you need to. It's a real light bleach solution, but that's the standard in the restaurant world. Is 50
Can you repeat that one? Can you repeat?
Sorry, I'm going really fast.
Yeah.
50 to 100 parts per million bleach to water. Bleach is my favorite sanitizer because it dissipates when it evaporates. It doesn't stay on surfaces, it leaves the surface. There's Quat, which is like an iodine based, and then there's some others, but I like good old fashioned bleach. Always mix bleach with cold water, because if you mix it with hot water, it'll dissipate through evaporation that much faster. That's the kitchen. I have a ton more. Every functional kitchen needs clean water, refrigeration, and firepower, right? And with each of those categories comes its own safety issues, right? We have we've been having clean water delivered as of late, rather than trying to bring it in. We've graduated from a couple 55-gallon barrels that we filled at the gas station to having cubes delivered. We have 2 gray water tanks now. We will have one that catches from, I think the bar is going to have water this year. By the way, everybody uses shower bags in our camp too. I don't allow pumps just so we don't burn through water. And they're responsible for their own water that way. But we have 2 gray water tanks. So the kitchen catch and the shower catch will go into the first one. And then there's a sump pump that pumps it to the second one, so that the second one always gets sucked out first. And then the first one is sort of a backup, right? I think I brought in 1,000 gallons the last year, and we pump sucked like, however many times that was, 6 times or something like that, because of the other water that shows up. Do you want to hear about how we doing on time? Do you want to hear about food permits for a second?
Yeah, I think that would be just, a brief, there's a lot of information online about food permits, but yeah, if you could just maybe give a brief overview of your approach to the food permits, the health permits from the state of Nevada.
Sure. Try not to have to get one, would be my advice. You really, it says right on the Burning Man page, you don't need to get one unless you're serving 125 people at a time on a consistent basis. Okay, if your main gift to the playa is food, someone or a number of people in your camp should have a food safety certification, because they're going to know all the protocols. This would be like serve safe, food handlers, safety. Or find a chef, find somebody in your camp who works in kitchens who is certified, because they're going to know the basic protocols. What you have happen when you get a permit is that you've now invited inspectors into your camp to review your kitchen and what's going on, right? And so that's fine, but it's just another level of bureaucracy. They may not let you start serving food if they find something wrong. They may make you wait and go back to town to get bleach test strips or whatever it is that they want. So, if you can avoid it, avoid it. Remember, if you're a smoothie bar, if you're a coffee house, technically you need a food permit. have a couple of handles of whiskey on hand so that you can say, no, we're not, we're a bar, because bars don't need food permits. That's the difference between drug regulation and food regulation in this country, is that they're totally different worlds. So yeah, consider yourself a bar. Yeah, don't expect a camp to give you drinking water, but expect a camp to be able to help you clean your cup out, you know, your cup if you're at a bar or something like that. What else, guys?
Just, you know, one other thing that we had talked about earlier is maybe a little bit about fuel safety. Jedi, you had mentioned, you know, because when
Yep.
we're working with, you know, big cookers, for example, even fire.
100%. We have 2 to 3 small art cars that are in camp. They all have their own fuel. I love that Hell opened up. That's been great for all of us. Register with Hell. Go pick up your fuel if you need to. They're great. Once we got an online generator and you parked it in the right place, they come and deliver fuel every morning. They write down how much fuel you've used. I mean, I just love seeing that. Doesn't speak plug and play to me. That speaks efficiency and safety and evolution, right, of the communal effort of the entirety of Burning Man coming together to make that a safer deal. At the end of the day, though, you walk through your camp, I've got 150 campers. I'll see fuel just sitting on the playa in red tubs. And so we create kind of a containment area or multiple containment areas. So like the art car that brings 60 gallons of fuel with them, they have their own container area. My fire performers that have white gas or whatever they have, they'll have their containment areas. And so while we're a large camp and I don't always know everybody that's there, everyone's pretty much vouched for, and I can identify kind of like who knows all the fire performers that are here. Okay, cool. Are you making sure that they've covered, because they'll send roaming environmentals through the camps. It's not like, you know, there's any law on trespassing. And if they see something like fuel that's out of place, FOOP, we call it, they'll call authorities over.
Awesome. And this morning in the plenary, there was a brief overview as well of fuel storage and just one of the other things.
FOOP.
FOOP storage. Of course, not near any heat sources and 10 feet away from.
I could tell you some stories. Oh my God, I could tell you some stories. We've thank God, we've survived some interesting ones. Like at the time that the exhaust melted a hole through the fuel container.
All right.
Oh, wow.
It was too close. Yeah, no, there's been some close calls. Those are years ago. We're so professional now.
Well, it's a lot of common sense things. So I just wanted to give, we're running a little bit over on our planned schedule for our topics here, but just Bridget or Anton, in a minute or so, did you have anything that you wanted to add about kitchen safety, food safety?
Yeah, I'd love to jump in with a couple of things if that's okay. Just sort of random things I was thinking of as we went along. First, I'd like to kind of disagree with you a little bit, Jedi, on the water thing. Our camp, we do water for the whole camp, and I think that there's a sustainability reason to do that, I guess. But I also think from a health and safety, like people who are dehydrated. I know we had on the run sheet, actually, you know, we love this OSHA term for just building and striking safely as occasional health and safety, you know, but yeah, keeping people hydrated, I think, is really important, particularly for build and strike, and just generally looking after them as humans, because, you know, things are unsafe enough, but that goes for the whole burn. And so what we tell our campers is to bring enough water for 24 hours. Personally, that's their responsibility, because we do have centralized camp water. But yeah, you know, you might get caught in the rain at the gate line for 24 hours. We feel like that's a good enough buffer to, like, if something goes wrong, we'll be okay, or have enough time to fix it. But I also want to add that in terms of parties, you know, I think there's this thing at Burning Man with, like, you know, water is your #1 radical self-reliance responsibility, which it is. But as a result, people are kind of more shifty about giving out water to people, even though we'll happily give you a bunch of alcohol. And so I kind of feel that, you know, if you're going to come to our party and we're going to have someone who's, you know, sober and knows where the fire extinguishers are, we should also be willing to, if you're thirsty, give you some water. But we're also in a fortunate position because we have such big water containers and a, like, working plumbing system that we can do that. So it kind of depends on yeah, where you're coming from. So that was one. Fire training in response. So we talked about fuel. Like one thing that's actually happened at our camp is a big smoker. They're smoking like 6 pork butts at the same time, caught on fire. And fortunately, we had not just fire blankets that were tried and didn't work, but then fire extinguishers that eventually put the fire out. But what also showed up there, right, is there are some people who don't know that you don't put water on an oil fire. So now we also have a pretty simple briefing on, basic fire training, and, hopefully this year, more opportunities for people to do more substantial fire training, but just getting people aligned on the basics, I think there is really good. Don't put water on an oil fire being one. And then the final thing I wanted to throw in all the way back to what Bridget was saying at the beginning, because I think this is a much lesser known fact, is if you're into radios, there are a kind of radios called MURS, M-U-R-S, that are like publicly available. You don't need a license, you just pay money and buy them. They work quite well on Playa because they're less known, so the frequencies are less used. And on MURS channel 5, it's the last one, the rangers and like ESD maintain like a listening watch on that channel. So you can actually use it to call emergency services from most places in Black Rock City if you have one of those radios. So if you're doing art that's like out in deep Playa, or you have a camp that's further away from a ranger outpost, might be something to consider.
Great, awesome, fantastic. Bridget, did you have anything that you wanted to add to this conversation, this topic right now?
No, I think we covered a lot. There was one question. Do you want me to answer it now? There was one question I saw in the thing, or do you want me to wait?
No, we're going to do question and answer period.
Yeah, so I'll just wait.
Okay, great.
Okay, thanks.
Well, fantastic. Let's go on to our next topic. Looking a little bit at building health and safety. Again, just this is to all panelists, just any general. And let's just keep it, to a couple of minutes here so we can stay within our time frame. Any general tips that you have for keeping build and strike safe, like clothing, state of your mind, wind, water? Anyone want to jump in with that? Occasional building safety?
You can wear a utility kilt with nothing else as long as you have steel-toed boots and a hard hat on.
Right
I
on.
mean, it's cute to, we've gotten to the point where we have like pallet rack that's 12 to 15 feet high. There's heavy materials that we're moving around. Sometimes we're up in the air. If we do the dome, you're 15, 16 feet in the air. It's cute to see those people who will try to do it barefoot and the rest of it, but I don't want to have to deal with that. If it's an easily avoidable incident, like, wear safety gear. Anton, we've gotten much better. I've gotten much better organizing my build crew. We didn't have build crews in the beginning, it was just us, and now that we do, it's a lot easier. I bought hard hats for everybody last year. It's easier to organize your safety equipment now for people if you just put a little pre-planning in.
Right. I'd add that, like on top of that, like one thing that we do, it's, you should, on the packing list is like, say, work gloves for the build crew. But honestly, what we do is we have a big box of safety glasses and ear plugs, with both of which are actually more useful for when you're building in the shop before Playa, and also like good work gloves, because like people are going to forget them. And, it's something that you just want to have available and make easy, and it's inexpensive, particularly relative to a reasonable camp budget. So like, why not just have them there and make it simple? I also just want to call out something that came up in the chat, that for build and strike, having dedicated people who are doing like, life safety, making sure people are hydrated, handing out Gatorade, cooking food, honestly, so people stay nourished, and double that for strike, honestly, really helps just keep people working. Having shade where people can rest in so they're not in the sun all day, and maybe scheduling your build and strike to take place at times that are less hot, like not in the middle of hot o'clock.
Let me just add to that real quick, because I tried bringing out 20 people for build years ago, and it was an absolute failure. I'm very strict about like those first few days. There's like 8 of us on site. We're building all the major structures. I mean, we're a pretty big camp now. So we have specialists coming on, knocking that out, and then everybody later comes in for window dressing. If they all want to be a part of build, great. We're gonna let them in. It's gonna be like Thursday or Friday or something like that.
Yeah. Also, if anyone's building a dome, reach out. There's right ways and wrong ways to do it. The wrong ways are pretty dangerous. Even the right ways are kind of dangerous. Happy to share that offline.
Don't build it from the ground up.
Yeah, please don't build it from the ground up, build it from the top down. That's really the main one.
And again, it seems like, a lot of this, as a camp lead myself, I know that a lot of this is just common sense. Like, I think the closed toe shoes is just, such common sense. But like Jedidiah is saying, you see people in flip flops, out there, and tired and just like maybe not focusing. And that's, these small little accidents can make a big dent in your whole experience for the week.
Right. I mean, so if I can just add one more
Yeah,
that you just
sure.
reminded me of, it's really, there's also part to the, managing crews like that, that's like know where people are at, right? If someone is visibly really tired, even if you were going to have them on like dome lifting duty, maybe it's time for them to like organize the tools in the box truck. Or, and that sucks because, we got to get work done and there's definitely a balance there. But sometimes that's, figuring out where people are at and making sure they're not beyond their limits.
Yes, absolutely. And making sure that they're sober too, I think is an important thing as well.
Yeah.
All right, we just have a short amount of time here for our next topic before we go to Q&A, and we actually have someone, a guest appearance to talk as well that came up in the chat regarding sexual safety and consent. But before we get to that, can we just talk briefly about COVID safety? I know, Bridget, you did a little overview, state of Nevada information, CDC information, but I just wanted to give, this is the big discussion, and it's going on a lot in chat. Are you going to require vax? Proof and stuff like that. But just from your point of view as camp leads, how are you approaching this this really tricky thing that we've been dealing with for a couple of years? Bridget, why don't you go ahead and start?
Yeah. So I deal with that every day in my work life because the San Mateo County Office of Education and the California Department of Public Health take the CDC guidelines and modify them, and then tell us what we need to do. I'm not always 100% in agreement, but I follow what those guidelines are. And, I think right now, so we had prom last week, so we had 42 cases in my campus this week. So it's been a bad week for me to talk about COVID. My hope is seriously that by August, end of August, that, we're back kind of where we were in March, because I think March was, everybody was sort of starting to breathe a little better and things seemed under control, and then BA2 is starting to come in. So I'm kind of hoping that by the end of August, we'll have this sort of under control. I think it's important that your camps talk about what are you going to do with people who test positive, because it's going to happen. And it's a big question, because what are you going to do if that person is your camp lead? What are you going to do if that person came with 6 other people in their vehicle? Are you going to send people home? Like, I think it's important for us to all be talking about it and have your campers sort of everybody on the same page. Okay, are we going to have a special tent that you're going to have to go and sit in for 3 days or whatever? Like, how are we going to deal with this? These conversations are going to have to start. And it's like Anton said, there's hard conversations, but you're going to have to start having them. And then I think we're going to have to sit back and wait for these sort of last minute guidance from the org, and then implement those. As long as we've started the conversations, as long as people understand their responsibility to not just themselves and their health, but to the health of everybody in our camps. And I think the more we talk about it, the more people can really understand the significance. And once we sort of as a camp have a guideline, because what are you going to do? We're a piano bar. We're not just going to be our, 16 people in our camp or the 90 people in our village. We're going to be 70,000 people together, and we don't want to limit people coming in to our interactivity. So I think what the guidelines that the org is going to set, I think is going to set the tone for it. And if everybody follows those guidelines and, implements it within their camp and their village, I think we'll we'll get through this in the safest, healthiest possible way.
Excellent. Thank you. And what's coming up on the chat and what I saw during the plenary as well is it's not only about being vaxxed, but
No.
testing. That, we need to have this kind of constant ongoing testing, but then we also do know that you can test negative, but maybe, not be showing.
So if I can just explain really quick, the difference between a PCR test and an antigen test. A PCR test will tell you if you've had it in the last 90 days. So that's why they tell you if you test positive on a PCR, don't test again for 90 days. Antigen tests are what I'm using mostly now, because at our school, we used to test every week. So if I have somebody who tests positive with a PCR now, I know that they've gotten it in the last week. But if you haven't been testing and you test positive on a PCR, you could have had it 6 weeks ago and be a asymptomatic person who was just positive. But antigen tests are different. They respond to a viral load. So you have to have a viral load to make that little card, make that second strip. So antigen tests are, at this point, with what we want to know right now, are really the way to go. So I would stock up on those antigen tests. And for most people who are, and you're absolutely right, Pita, what you said, people are infectious for 2 days before they test on a PCR or an antigen test. So it's those 2 days that are the problem, because you're not going to have enough of a viral load to activate those tests. So again, it's just one of those things, vaxxed or not vaxxed, my kids, so out of the 500 kids that I have 98% that are vaccinated, but yet I have 42 cases. So people are passing it along. The people who are vaccinated are not getting as sick. They're not going to the hospital. So that's what your camp has to really think about, is how you're going to handle this. And what are you going to do with a positive? Or are you just not going to bring any tests at all and say, you know what, if you're symptomatic, you go, just separate yourself, wear a mask, do those type of things. So that's where the org and your camp have to sort of come together and have an understanding of how we're going to handle this. And the terrain may be completely different at the end of August. Hopefully it's so different that we don't even have to worry about it.
Yeah, let's keep our fingers crossed on that. Well, thank you. I want to go to questions now, because we're coming to just for almost finished with our time here. So Epiphany, I wanted to know if there are some questions that our panelists can answer, and then if we have time, we'll invite someone to come and speak about the other thing. So go ahead, Epiphany.
Yeah, we have a few questions, and also I got some more links into the chat just recently, so check there for more information about all of our topics. The question I have first is for Tetris from Jedidiah. Does Narcan work with fentanyl?
Yeah, I saw that question, and the answer is yes. So the Narcan works for opioids. It works for OxyContin. It works for any type of pain medication. It works for fentanyl. It works for methadone, and it works for Vicodin. So what it doesn't work for is cocaine, benzoids, and alcohol. But everything else, and like I said before, if you don't know what the person took, you cannot hurt them by giving them Narcan. Okay, if it is one of those, if it's that they took cocaine and they're out of it, or they're out of it for alcohol, and you try the Narcan, you cannot hurt them. Okay, if it is an opioid and you don't try it, then you can hurt them. So the best thing is that Narcan is totally benign if the person hasn't had opioids. So I think that's the key. That's as important to know, to use it rather than not use it. That's the real advice I'd like people to take away, is just use it. And if you see an immediate response, you know that there was opioids in that person. And then follow the guidelines to put them on their side, because they could vomit. It's a really jarring response. So just turn them to their side in case they vomit, stay with them, obviously. And then I would administer a second dose of Narcan after about 10 minutes.
Thank you.
Can I add something here as well? And Bridget, please correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding too is the other thing to know about Narcan is it's not a total cure, right? Not a panacea. What it does is temporarily block the effect of opioids on the receptors they act on in the brain. And what that means is if you give someone Narcan, like you've got to find them like a doctor. Like if you're giving them Narcan, you're also calling the Rangers and getting them to ESD because the Narcan can wear off and they can go back into an overdose.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Thank you for bringing that up again. Yeah, I did mention that in my presentation that these people need help. They can't just go back to camp. And that's why, like I was saying, Anton, the second dose is so important. So, and that's why there's 2 doses in a box.
Thank you. Thank you both. The next question is for everyone from Kate. She is curious if there will be any messaging from the org regarding having people carrying their vaccination cards on them, since some camps will be requiring that for interaction.
I say
This is for
put it in your bike, on your bike thing, like with your license, just have it.
But as
Right.
far
Is
as
this,
what they-
are you saying, do we have any insight on whether the org is going to require it?
No.
Just to speak on it, in Rancho, we're all consenting adults. We all take risks. We all know each other pretty well. Most of us have had COVID or been vaccinated. I got COVID from triple vaccinated campmates myself. So, you know, it's out there. It happens. Numbers are getting better. Hopefully it's a non-issue by the time we get there. You know, we'll be prepared to respect the org's wishes, but we're pretty fearless and libertarian and careful at our camp. So that's the way we roll.
And from what I understand, the org is going to be coming out. You know, again, we're not speaking for the org at all. Jedi's speaking for his camp. You know, we're all speaking from our own experience. But what I do understand through just planning this particular breakout is that the org is working. There's a COVID task force that is working together, and it was referred to this morning, as Bridget noted, in the plenary. And there's going to be, I don't know, some kind of announcement or event to clarify what the org is going to be implementing or advising or whatever for COVID.
Yeah, and I'd like to say too, like we were just saying, that one of the things about Burning Man is being responsible for yourself and being responsible for your community. So whether you're vaccinated or you're not vaccinated, you can get COVID. And so do be a responsible citizen and keep yourself healthy. If you start to not feel well, admit it. You know, take a test if you've brought some antigen tests, and if you're negative, go on about your business. Just be responsible for everybody else, for yourself and everyone else in your community. That's all I think we can do, right?
Great, thank you. Epiphany.
Okay, Brett would like to hear more from the panel about their content sections as applied to interactivity.
Safety and interactivity.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly, I talked to the guys who have that camp with the bike ramps and the rest of it, and they sit back and they watch people, you know, break their arms basically and things like that. I mean, I think if you're creating physical challenges for people, we had a manual mechanical bull one year or a couple years in a row. And I'll tell you the value of the Who, What, Where journal was, we didn't advertise it, but throughout the week, people showed up and they're like, hey, we heard about your manual mechanical bull, right? In a box, wooden box. And, you know, 4 people go out, they pull the ropes and you ride on the little barrel, right? Oh, people were taking diggers off of that thing. And I mean, the guy the father of our friend who built it, I mean, these were planks, man. So we were like, well, shit, we need to get some bike helmets for people. Like, we're going to have a major, like, we're going to kill somebody here if we're not careful. So I think that you know, while you've signed a waiver with Burning Man that you might die, putting people in positions where they're super unsafe in your camp is bad, and you are liable for that. I know Burning Man sends people around to kind of like shake structures and knock on them and see if they're strong enough, wooden staircases and things like that. But you know, it's ultimately, your responsibility. And as a camp lead, it's your responsibility to kind of like monitor what's going on throughout the camp too, and putting your foot down if you have to. It's a reason that you reach the level of being a mayor. Other people respect you. They come to you. They expect you to be able to make a decision on the spot of whether something's can continue or it has to stop. We have a sheriff now as well at our camp. We've got a chief engineer. So keep all of that in mind. I mean, it's really what happens on your property is your responsibility. If you're putting people in danger, they need to know that, or they need to be protected from it.
I'd like to plus one that, be it regardless of the rules, be a responsible party host. Most of our interactivity is food, and so all the food safety stuff, like doing that properly and teaching people how to do it properly, is important, particularly having good hand washing and dishwashing facilities. And then the only other thing I'll add is there's kind of two ways I found to make something safer at Burning Man. One way is to actually make it really safe, cordon it off, put pads under it if it's the thing you fall off or whatever. The other way, given that people are kind of consenting to be there and Burning Man is dangerous, is to make it visibly look really dangerous. Because the most dangerous thing is something that is dangerous but doesn't look dangerous. And so one of our interactivities is we used to make French fries. We had a propane powered French fryer, and that thing was crazy. But the best way to keep people away from it was just to let it do its thing. It sounded like a jet engine. There were flames shooting into the bottom. There was hot oil firing out the top. People stayed away from that unless they knew what they were doing. So I'll offer that as an option. Don't conceal the danger. Or maybe.
Okay, maybe time for a couple more questions, or do we have any more questions, Epiphany?
Yeah, I wonder if Bridget or Anton have more to say about how to best build our camps and interactivities with regard to social anxiety after the pandemic.
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting when Level brought it up this morning. I think one of the best things that he said was, don't make Burning Man your first, outing, and by outing, I don't mean going to the grocery store, but I mean, getting together with groups of people. You've got to this is one of the things that everybody's been saying all along, especially with mental health. Treat yourself with kindness, know your limits. So if you are not at that point yet where you are comfortable going into Target without a mask and stuff like that, just start working your way towards it, and be kind to yourself. Know your limits. See how moving forward, how your body responds to it, and just take steps. You've got I forget how many weeks they said till the burn, 4 months, so 16 weeks. Just set yourself up a plan, but try and keep moving forward. One of the best things, stop watching the news. Stop Googling it. Just get back into your own sense of self, identify how things make you feel, and just keep moving forward. I think that that's the best advice I can give, is just, and I think Level was completely right. Don't make Burning Man your first big gathering.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And the other two things I just offer, recognize that, people, depending on how your camp is based and how you usually hang out, are coming from really different places, and people have had very different experiences during the pandemic, and continue to do so. So having empathy for that, and extending one another, kind of space to be able to hold conversations about it is important. And then, related to kind of easing into it up to the burn, maybe consider having a camp gathering if you haven't done that. And, because then you'll get to navigate some of the same conversations and issues in a smaller but really important container, and that'll give you the sort of trust and strength to be able to do it in a bigger, more complicated one later.
And I think, just to add on what you expressed at the beginning of our talk about developing, a lot of that safety in the camp, in those conversations with your campmates around COVID. And I think that alone really helps perhaps to lower the social anxiety around it, is precisely what you said earlier of, have these conversations, put things in place to help people feel safe with safe words and, different things like that. So I think those are some good ideas as well.
Yeah. And I think, Pita, you brought it up too, or somebody brought it up. I know I heard it today, was, you know, we had always talked about consent and not hugging people, you know, without saying, you know, can I give you a hug? Maybe that's going to be a little more relevant this year. And it may not be just their physical space, but it might be just the last 3 years, you know, have made people, you know, feel uncomfortable with being that close to others. So I think it's just accepting your personal limits, understanding your personal space, and respecting others. Because I think that's going to be a bigger thing this year than it has been in the past.
Yeah, fantastic. Perfect. Well, we're just about at the end of our time here. Epiphany, is there anything else on your list?
Yes, last but not least, I did receive a suggestion because we have Laszlo with us to expand on sexual safety and consent. Would that be all right?
Yeah, we've got about 2 minutes.
Please
2
do.
minutes.
Let's run over. Stick around.
Yeah.
We can't run over.
We have another
was gonna do
breakout
that.
coming in on this.
Oh, it's
exact
straight away. I'm
morning.
sorry.
Yeah. All right, go ahead.
Hi, everybody. I'm Laszlo from Orgy Dome. We've, you know, I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole with the COVID thing, but obviously we came out in early 2020 and said, we're not going to do our space based on the existence of COVID. And last year we decided we wouldn't go at all. This year we're going to go as a camp. We may not have a play space depending on what the org decides. And if we do have a play space, it is going to require vaccination or proof of a test. But I wanted to talk more about the consent issues, because if you're going to have a camp that has members in it and you're providing any sort of sexual play whatsoever, even more now than usual, that creates an issue with COVID. We think that putting people in a confined space, because you can't have sex in the open on the playa, allowing people to engage in consensual conduct in a confined space is particularly risky right now. And so it's our position as of now that we would not permit that without either a proof of a negative test or a vaccination. As far as the consent inside the space, we monitor people coming in. We make sure that they are capable of giving consent, that they're not overly inebriated or they appear to be pressured. One of the things that we've encountered over the years is couples come in, and by the way, we're couples and moresomes only. We don't allow singles. Couples come in and one of the partners clearly doesn't want to be there, and we've gotten pretty good at recognizing that kind of a situation. So we take them aside and you know, interview them separately. And if somebody's not down for the experience, we don't let them in. But we have dome monitors in the play space who are constantly walking around. We all carry radios. We have a security team. So if something is going down that somebody thinks is problematic, we immediately eject that party. And we also have developed tools to deal with people inside the space, where if somebody appears to be, you know, they seemed conscious when they showed up, but now they're looking a little too high, we'll ask them to come outside with us and talk to them and make sure they're capable of giving consent. So this year more than ever, I think that's going to be a very important thing to deal with within the context of sexual consent in general.
Great. Thank you so much for popping in. It's a real brief piece of information. We also did do a campfire talk on consent last year, and you can find that if you Google Campfire Talks, Kindling, Burning Man, you will see there is, I believe it was last April, we had a campfire talk all around consent. So you can go back and look at that. We have to wrap it up now because we have a real hard stop time. I want to say thank you to everybody. We put so much effort into this breakout. Bridget, Jedidiah, Anton, Laszlo, thanks for coming on here. And then our fabulous back support with Epiphany and KBOT. And I just appreciate you all being here. And thank you.
You
And
did a great job.
we have more
Great.
breakouts coming up at 2:45. So check it out. And thanks again. See
Bye,
you.
everybody.
Yeah, thanks so much, y'all.
Bye, guys.
All right.
See you all.
All right. Bye-bye.
See you around. See you on play.
Bye.